And when I hear people like Eddie Hearn's Oppo, Frank Smith, talking about my reaction, this is what Matchroom guys love to do. Welcome to One to One with Simon Jordan. We've gone up in the world. Auspicious surroundings, the boardroom. Or just the cupboard, possibly. Anyway, let's get on with the show. What do I make of the reaction from people like Matchroom that have been very critical of the interview that was set up on the show I do with Jim White? I don't make very much of it, quite frankly. I mean, vested interest comes to the fore. When I hear observations about the nature of this man's mentality from people that probably haven't spent a lot of time trying to ascertain what it is, I didn't get the feel when I sat with Chris Eubank prior to the show, during the show, and subsequently post the show, that despite the fact that he's obviously got great grief and tragedy in his life, that this was a man that was particularly unhinged. Now, people will have their views. And when I hear people like Eddie Hearn's Oppo, Frank Smith, talking about my reaction, this is what Matchroom guys love to do. They love to misrepresent and mischaracterize and don't deal with the facts. They don't answer the questions. And they make observations that aren't true, and they take you off on flights of fancy where people forget what the original question was. At no point did I say that I was uncomfortable with the interview with Chris Eubank, which is being represented by this guy, Frank Smith at Matchroom. What I said was, I was uncomfortable like any father to listen to a criticism of someone's child by the father. I wasn't uncomfortable with the interview. I didn't think it was particularly necessary that we loaded a question, given the fact that I had said to Chris Eubank Jr.'s face, which most people don't do, that I felt that certain aspects of his career bordered upon him being a charlatan. We had that debate. And of course, it's natural, given the fact that Eubank Sr. has strong views, that he was going to address that situation. So I don't make a lot of it. What I find with these guys, who are at the very top of their profession, making good fights, is that they don't answer questions. And when they do answer questions, or they make observations on other people, normally it's insulting or inaccurate. It's about how much money you do and don't have, or what you do and don't know. And you look at those guys and you go, really? Really? So I look at it and say, media operates in a certain way. I was concerned that Chris Eubank Sr. shouldn't have possibly said those things in public. Hence the reason I said during the interview, really, Chris, you're making this about you and it should be more about your son and the decisions that he's making. But I certainly don't sit here thinking that there was any irresponsibility, any manipulation, any desire to put somebody in an invidious position that was obviously struggling with certain aspects of his life. And I felt that the actual motivation of the interview was to celebrate Eubank Sr. and was quite surprised that his first answer to a question about how proud he was something quite different. Now, if people want to take that as a negative, if people want to turn it into something that it wasn't, you might want to ask them why. You might want to ask them why they would be putting Eubank into a fight with a currently compromised fighter. You might want to ask them why their views are attacking other people about an honest appraisal of a situation, which is once upon a time when Eddie Hearn, who has lots to say for himself, ducked a set of interviews. I called it cowardly, not him. And from that point on, what Matchroom have done is keep on attacking and keep on misdirecting. And I listened to the observation that we do things for clicks. Well, let's have it right. Matchroom approached us for me to do a sit down with Eddie Hearn as a one-off special on DAZN. And I said, no, the only way you're going to do it is come on our show because you're not that important. So I listened to this background noise being perpetuated through some of these YouTube peddlers that never answer a question. Whilst it doesn't particularly trouble me and the silly little barbs that are thrown out about me by inconsequential individuals, I do think sometimes they do need to be addressed. And I just have. Well, it depends what your dreams are. I mean, some people's dreams are to be very wealthy as a result of playing football. Some people play football very well and get wealthy as a result of that, and probably the two dovetail in the middle. I don't think he's setting any precedents. I think he's an individual, no more than when Oscar, scarpered from Chelsea at 26 years of age and went over to play in the Chinese league. did it set a blueprint? It's a moment in time. The Saudis have very little to offer in terms of competitive football other than finances. So these guys, much like the American leagues in the 1970s, when the New York Cosmos or the Fort Lauderdale, whatever they were, or the other sides that were playing in American football were trying to attract big names, there's an element of that. The difference with this is Neves is at a certain stage, a bit like Oscar. Look, it's a disruptor, Saudi at this moment in time. The reason why it's a disruptor is because it will allow other leagues to be put under pressure by the finances of Saudi. But it's only a certain type of player that at a key time in their career will go to Saudi and compromise commercial, and not so much commercial, but sporting integrity by just taking a bag of money. It says more about Ruben Neves than it does say about the blueprints for other footballers and for young footballers coming through. There will always be an element of young footballers that see the finances and the gold dust and the starry lights, and there's those that see the achievements. And of course, the academy system in this country is designed to try and prepare young players for the successes of the levels that they'll play at. The Saudis themselves, well, they have a right to involve themselves in world football. They're behind the curve, and the only way they're going to sort of shorten that process of being a competitive league is by perhaps bringing talent in alongside us, developing their own young talent through their own academies, and somewhere in the middle, maybe in 5 or 10 years' time or a generation's time, we might see a competitive Saudi league where it becomes a world competitive league. I'd like to see some sort of governance over football and its finances that supersedes just UEFA's financial fair play, but sets a blueprint so the leagues like this can't break the ecosystem because of the ridiculous amounts of money. Let's be clear, the Middle Eastern guys are probably more focused than the Chinese were about building leagues up because of the nature of what they see it for. The Chinese are not trying to buy influence. The Chinese have a very different worldview, but the Middle Eastern guys are, and sport becomes a great conduit for that. So these are interesting times. Do I have a great deal of admiration for Neves as a footballer? Yeah, as a talented player. Do I have a great deal of admiration for this choice? Not particularly, because he could make that choice in 2 or 3 years' time when his career was moving in a different direction. But I don't think we need to worry too much about it being a precedent. Do I think Tim Sherwood was being disingenuous? I think he was being misrepresentative. I think he was shrouding the observations he made in a characterization that suited him. But disingenuity, I don't know. I mean, look, he made observations about his contract status, which with Tottenham that we have very different information prepared for me on in terms of the interview. Seemingly Tottenham seemed to think he might have had a contractual status that was akin to what I was saying. The argument about Harry Kane and the transfer fee that is in that interview on Upfront that I do on another platform is a matter of fact. Tottenham didn't get offered 150 million quid, so there's no point Tim espousing that nonsense. The observations about Harry Kane being prepared to be sold somewhere else, 600 grand. Well, Daniel Levy refutes that, and I think legally they've had a word with Tim about it. So I think there was an element of, like a lot of the times in football, people saying things they think they can get away with, and then subsequently finding out that they possibly can't. So whilst I don't think it was steeped in disingenuity, I think there was elements of hypocrisy, I think there were elements of disingenuity, and I think there were elements of misrepresentation. How Machiavellian and how contrived they were, you'd have to ask Tim Sherwood that. A variety of things. One of the reasons why I'm in the media is because I see the benefit of the media. I see that despite having disliked it intensely and still dislike certain aspects of it, because I think the way that media represents things and characterize things and sensationalize things irritates the living daylights out of me, and I think is a dangerous proposition, from whether they do it in societal issues or political issues or even in sporting issues. I push back against it because I think there's a space that media needs to operate with a degree of authenticity and integrity, and often it misses both of those scenarios. And I also think there's a lack of education in the media. If you ask people a question, often the answer that they give isn't even interrogated by the journalists because they don't know the answer. So my journey is perhaps into building my own platform. I've very much enjoyed the talkSPORT stuff because It's very easy to see the vision before the vision arrives, and now the broadcasting that I do seems to be going okay. People seem to like it, some people don't. And so for me, it's not an economic decision. I don't do this because financially I need to. I do it because I enjoy the opportunity of correcting a few people, taking people into the space where they hear an alternate view. And of course, when you've got scarcity, there aren't many football club owners that have owned a team that's played in the Premier League, that's been at the top of the Championship, that's pretty much been involved in most of the things in football, that are speaking in the media. So it gives a very different dimension. I'm all about balance and equitability. And so many people in the media, whether it's politicians like Boris Johnson, are figments of the media's imagination. They aren't what you think they are. And I'm just quite interested in developing media platforms, aggregated businesses, and a whole raft of other things, and maybe some sports stuff, but I'm very relaxed. I'm fortunate enough to have engineered a position, despite spending 50 million quid on a football club, that I can make my own choices. Right, that's it for a different location for One-to-One with Simon Jordan. Don't forget to let me know your views on the subjects we've discussed. Keep leaving questions in the comment section below, and I'll see you next time out.